Welcome. Today we are going to be talking about the disappearance of Peng Jiamu, and I apologize in advance if I mispronounce anything here. I'm going to do my best, So Peng Jiamu was a biochemist and explorer. He went on a routine expedition in the Lopnor desert in 1980, not knowing that it would be his last. I will be painting the beautiful mountains from a place called Immortal Fairyland, or commonly, I guess, known as 7-Star Crags Park, which is located in Peng's birth province near the city of Zhaoqing. Peng was born in Panyu within the Guangdong province of China in 1925. He moved 1,400 kilometers, or around 900 miles, across the country to pursue his studies, and he was a very bright student and ended up graduating at age 22 from the Central University of China in Jiangsu, which is actually now called Nanjing University, and he graduated with a degree in biology. And pretty quickly after this, he decided to continue pursuing this field. He worked very hard and secured a spot working at the Shanghai Institute of Biochemistry, which is part of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, alongside some renowned scientists and academics, including his mentor Cao Tangqin, where they worked on pro-collagen from rabbit skin, along with work on muscle protein. I'm not a biologist, so I'm not really sure what significance that has, but apparently it was a big deal. And his mentor Cao was a really influential teacher to everyone who worked with and under him, and his students described him as always willing to explain steps in, interesting ways. Like, for example, one time he compared nucleic acid to Juliet and protein to Romeo. And I think that having such an inspiring and enthusiastic mentor probably was very important in forming the scientist that Peng would eventually be. And under Cao's tutelage, Peng was able to just flourish. His work really quickly gained traction, and he became well known in the scientific community, specifically for those in the fields of biochemistry and cell biology. But in 1956, at the age of 31, Peng saw that the Chinese Academy of Sciences were actually organizing an expedition in the Xinjiang autonomous region of China, which is an area known for having many deserts and mountain ranges and is populated with several small ethnic groups. This is actually the area where the Silk Road passed through China and Central Asia and connected it to the Middle East. And Peng was a wonderful student, but he really wanted to apply his knowledge elsewhere. He was so passionate about kind of reaching out further than his laboratory, and he kind of wanted to go and learn in the unknown. And in his application to the program, when he's addressing the CAS, the Chinese Academy of Sciences president, Guo Moruo, part of his application letter reads, "I have a strong wish to explore the frontiers. I have the courage to pave a way in the wilderness," which is really poetic and kind of beautiful, and you can really hear his passion. And because of this and his strong application, he was accepted into the program, and this would basically start the rest of his life of exploration. He started going on these expeditions. He actually briefly left the Xinjiang expedition because he had a malignant tumor, so he went to Shanghai to treat this, and he immediately returned to Xinjiang after he, had it treated. So you can really see how passionate he was about his desire to explore. He was kind of like a Chinese Indiana Jones, just wanting to get right back out into the field. So one of the several extraordinary natural elements that are a part of this region include the lake Lopnor. And when I was researching this, I thought the name was really interesting. It didn't sound Chinese to me. And I found out it's actually Mongolian. So the Chinese town nearby is called Luobupojian, or Luozhong, but it's more commonly known as Lopnor. But basically, it's a pretty much completely dry, huge, enormous, vast lake system, and it's a former salt lake. So there's two rivers called the Tarim River and the Shul River, which emptied into it, and it is so vast because it was once where a glacier sat, also known as a glacial lake, which are present. You can see them on all of the continents, I believe, in various sizes. So this former lake was over 10,000 kilometers squared, which is enormous. It's about 3,800 square miles. Lopnor was very elusive, you can imagine, because it was so big. It was very mysterious. It was also a drainage basin, which is also called, I believe it's pronounced endorheic, meaning that it retains all the water that came into it with no outlet. And the lake itself was about 3,000 square kilometers, or about 1,150 miles squared, by the year 1928. But since then, there were several dams built, and so less and less water has flown into the lake, and it became a really dry area. And only certain times of the year and in small areas are there going to be water and marshes. But the salt that remained in the lake has left up to 40 inches or 100 centimeters of salt encrusted over the base of this lake, which is an insane amount. So after that first application, Peng and the rest of the expedition teams would commonly travel throughout Lopnor and the surrounding deserts and areas, and Peng was described as always optimistic and as having high confidence in his work by one of his team members from the Xinjiang Institute of Chemistry. He was a scientist named Chen Zicai, who went with Peng on his 1964 expedition. So Chen described the area as having really harsh conditions and reported it as having complicated topography, extreme weather, and frequently moving sand dunes, which reportedly claimed the lives of hundreds of people throughout the years. According to an article in the Daily Mail from China, 6 skeletal remains of humans were discovered in the desert just between 2005 and 2007, and those are just the ones that have been discovered, so there are so many more predicted to be there unfound from years and years prior. However, despite these conditions, Peng continued to explore. He made some really notable discoveries and reports on the area, which really made him renowned, including discoveries on potassium accumulation in the desert, as well as he found several wild species in the areas he visited throughout the Xinjiang province. And he continued just with his enthusiasm and passion for the work, no matter what, traveling across the rough terrain in reportedly camels, horses, canoes, and cars over thousands of miles. Even as these cars would, fall into the marsh pits and sand dunes, he always maintained his positivity. There was a brief pause in the expeditions between 1966 and 1976 because of the Cultural Revolution. But even during this time, Peng vowed to return to his journey as soon as possible, and in 1979, he right away made plans for just that. Little did he know it would be his last journey. In 1979, he had such acclaim that he was elected as vice president of the CAS's Xinjiang division, so all of his work there really gave him a reputation, and he was able to form a group that included archaeologists, biologists, geologists, and chemists to come with him on the expedition. In summer of 1980, they left for Lopnor. This time, however, the conditions were apparently a bit different. I'm not sure if the group didn't prepare as well as usual or if the winds were extra difficult, but the expedition driver, his name is Wang Wanxuan, reported that the road was actually more difficult than usual to navigate and that their water was running out early in the trip. So they set up camp on June 12th, and they were really low on food and water already. A lot of the group morale was actually really low, but Peng still somehow stayed positive. He said, quote, "Science is to walk a road not yet traveled by other people." So he was a very quotable guy, and Wang says that he never forgot those words and that it really did help boost the morale of the group. After they set up camp, they continued for 5 days with their explorations. They went to sleep on the night of the 16th and just expected the next day to be completely like normal. So they woke up again thinking that it would just be like any other day, like difficult to navigate, and maybe they would be tired and thirsty, but it would be a normal day. That is until they realized that Peng was not in the camp. Instead, what they found was a note left by Peng. He had left the camp sometime at night, maybe at 10:30, as I read this note, because it mentions it, but I'm not sure if that's what the 10:30 writing has to do with. He was basically saying he was going out to find water, but he never returned. His disappearance was very high profile. He was a well-known scientist. Even high-level officials at the time, like Deng Xiaoping, who was the paramount leader of China at the time, were drawn to this case and, wanted him to be found. So according to a newspaper article from the time, the government was very concerned, and the Air Force was even deployed to search for him, including over a dozen planes and over 100 soldiers in total. They even had police officers from back in Shanghai, as well as the Shandong and Jiangsu provinces, come in with police dogs, but the desert, like we said, was not reliable. Even smaller winds could move the sand dunes around and completely conceal something within days, let alone if there were higher winds. And Peng had also gotten, I guess you could call it a head start. He had left at night and they didn't realize it until the next day that he was gone. Despite 3 large search and rescue expeditions, which included police, military, as well as members of Peng's team, searching every inch around the camp, they could not find him. His case was spread around the entire country very quickly. It even ignited a TV series called Searching for Peng Jiamu in the 1990s. In 2005, a team of amateur explorers, along with a former colleague of Peng's, who was now nearly 80 years old, by the name of Xia Xinjiang, decided to form another search. And this wasn't a random decision, and it was actually because those bodies found between 2005 and 2007, I mentioned before, basically every time they found a new body, they thought it would be Peng. And this time it was because a scientist from Chinese Academy of Sciences named Deng Jiabao discovered a body in a remote sand pit in Lopnor's desert. However, all of the bodies previously mentioned, including Dong's discovery, none of them could be proven as Peng. Despite this, and despite him not being found, it is widely presumed that he did pass on the 17th of June. Peng was recognized as a passionate and intelligent man. He had a desire for adventure, and he was called a martyr for the name of science. Though he is not likely to be found, there are several theories as to what could have happened. Some of these I kind of formed in my own research because there really aren't that many reports. I guess it's from the 1980s, and maybe there's more than what I could find, but you can just judge it for yourself. So starting off with the most common and probably the most likely ones is that Peng's death was an accident caused by natural elements. So first of all, mentioned by Xia, was that sandstorms are very common in the area, and they can completely conceal something in a short amount of time. So Xia pointed out that they found a camel buried with just the lower part of one leg above the sand just 3 days after it was lost. He noted that the winds were 10 degrees, which, based on the temperatures of the desert, it could be anywhere from 10 to 20 miles per hour or 20 to 30 per hour. And that really isn't that high because the sand is so loose and there are so many sand dunes. This means that if he had, succumbed to the winds, even close to camp, his body probably would have been covered very quickly. The only thing about this is that they did search really, really thoroughly around the campsite, so he must have walked a lot further, or maybe he had gotten lost at night and then had this happen. The next theory is pretty similar. It's about loose soil hills. So Xia also mentioned that there are these things called loose soil hills in the area. So since the place once had a lot of water, there were marshes around, and the sediment and sand in the area it varies a lot really quickly. So it's not just sand, but there's also underground pockets of soil, and there's also little hills of soil. The winds were pretty strong, like we said, and travelers would hide behind these soil hills to protect themselves from the wind. They would also hide to protect themselves from the sun, but again, Peng left at night, so it was most likely if he hid here, it was because of the wind. So what happens with these loose soil hills is that when explorers go to hide behind them, the soil can actually collapse and suffocate the people underneath them. If the soil had collapsed on Peng, he would have been trapped. Again, this one is definitely likely, but it would also still be contingent on him going farther than we expected. And I guess it's also a little weird because he's a very experienced explorer. He's been doing this for decades, and I guess it would be a little surprising of him to have had this happen to him, but at the same time, if he was dehydrated, then he might have been hallucinating or something, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So the next theory is just straight up dehydration or hypothermia. So obviously the team had been low on water for a week, and at that point, if they were already low on water when they arrived, he was probably already dehydrated by the time he went out looking for more water. If Peng was out there alone, he probably wouldn't be carrying as much to keep himself safe. The dehydration and the cold probably would have accelerated demonstrated, his discomfort if he was hallucinating or delirious because of a lack of water or a low body temperature. He might have fallen unconscious or passed away just like that, with his body again being covered by the sands. I almost hope it was this one, because if he had, just kind of fallen asleep from the hypothermia, then I would imagine that would be the least painful way to go. But yeah, so those are the more standard theories that most people expect that happen pretty much with any desert or kind of wild disappearance. There are also some more mysterious and maybe more unlikely ones. And before I say these, for the record, all of the information that I'm going to say is alleged. It is conjecture, and I'm not making any claims about any parties. I'm not an investigative expert, and these are all just hypothetical situations. In my research, I found a few more interesting facts about the Lopnor area that made me wonder if something else had happened. And I'm sorry if somebody else has already thought about these, but... So, on the 16th of October in 1959, China established the Lopnor nuclear test base with the help of the Soviets to help them choose the site. And this basically rendered Lopnor the site of China's first nuclear test. And to this day, it is the only known Chinese nuclear weapons test site within the country. This area includes nuclear weapons training, testing, and allegedly a major stockpile of nuclear weapons. When I first read about this place, it kind of reminded me of the case of the Frog Boys in Korea. And if you aren't familiar with that, basically the skeletal remains of 5 young boys who had gone missing. They were between the ages of 9 and 13. But these remains were found near a military base in South Korea. And in their sleeves were several military-grade bullets and, I believe, cartons of these shells that were really specific to the nearby military. The fact that the military was never investigated made it a popular theory that it had been covered up by the Korean government, allegedly. This theory could allege that Peng had possibly been traveling around the dry desert lake area to find water and had accidentally stumbled across the nuclear test site and either had seen something he wasn't supposed to and had to be taken care of, so to speak, or he was discovered by a member of the military there who thought he might be a spy or something like that and had been maybe killed before he could explain who he was. And also it was the nighttime, so he might have lost his way. They could only see his movements in the dark, and again, it's a nuclear test site founded by the government. They're probably very suspicious of any activity happening around them that isn't official business. This could also be why his body was never found close to the campsite, despite years and years of continued rescue missions and hundreds of people searching for him. Maybe his body was not left in the desert and the military was okay with searching the areas and making such a fuss because they knew he wouldn't be found. Again, this is all conjecture. It has no basis or evidence. I don't want to get in trouble, but it's just something kind of scary to think about. The next theory, which I don't really believe, but who cares about my opinion, is that he was killed by someone on his team. Now, again, there's no evidence for this, and accusing somebody who lost their teammate of murder is really aggressive and potentially hurtful, but I read somebody mention this. Again, it could be why the team members all participated in the search, because if one of them had done it, he wouldn't be concerned about the body being found since they all knew the desert really well. So if somebody had done it, then they could have possibly concealed his body really well. Someone might have been jealous of his success and popularity, or, wanted the group to go home because they knew they would die out there, and Peng insisted on staying, which sounds far-fetched, but people have been killed for less. Another website that I read pointed out that obviously the food and water could not have been that low because everyone on the trip seemed fine. Like, they had been there for 5 days, and Peng was an experienced traveler. If he was dehydrated, he probably would have known the limits and brought his team home. I don't think he would risk endangering the team. It was just kind of odd that he could have waited until morning and gone with somebody else instead of going into the cold at night alone. But again, he was very confident and independent, and if he had been dehydrated, he could have just been delirious. Now, the last theory, I'm not going to get into too much because it's kind of, okay, well, you'll know. It was just something random on the internet. But some people say that Peng was attacked, abducted, and or eaten by something called the giant worm of the Chinese desert, or I think it might be called the Mongolian death worm. So it originated in this 1926 book called On the Trail of Ancient Man, and it said essentially just a cryptozoological myth of a creature living in the Gobi Desert, which is literally right near where Lopnor is. So it is kind of interesting. It really just reminds me of the worm in Star Wars. So I guess anything's possible. But yeah, those are all of the theories. Comment below what you think happened. Realistically, I think he suffered hypothermia just a little bit too far away from the camp. He could have been scavenged and was just never uncovered, which is so sad. He was a really intelligent and impactful person, and it's a shame that nobody will ever know what happens to him. But there is a memorial out in the desert for him, and his team has never given up on trying to find him. So comment what other cases you want to see that haven't been talked about a lot on the internet. That's kind of the mission of this, is to talk about things and bring awareness to things that people don't really talk about that much, especially in non-Western world countries. Thank you guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.